Okay, welcome back to the next episode of Two Airheads and a Boxer.
Floyd Mayweather couldn't be with us. He's picking up another Tiger today.
Does he own Tigers? I know
Probably,
Tyson owns
I don't
Tiger. Everybody does, right? Apparently you can get them for like $2K, I just recently found out. So
Billions
weird.
of dollars, it seems to be the thing to have.
I didn't realize they were so cheap. Thank you, Tiger King. So, on this week's episode, we are finally ready to basically remove the back end of the bike. We got to remove the subframe first, so that we can get access to
Swing arm.
It
makes access to the swing arm a little bit easier. As you can see, we put the rear wheel back on. That's so we can use the brakes to keep the axle from, or the drive shaft from spinning while we loosen the bolts on that. But that's going to be the big thing today is removing the swing arm, getting the drive shaft off, or unhooked, and getting that all separate so that we can get closer to removing the motor.
All right, great. So last time we took the front end, this episode is going to be taking off the back end. Thanks for joining us. As always, if you like what you see, click the subscribe button, click the bell notification so you get notifications when we post new content. Like, share, comment, do everything down below. But thank you for joining us in the next episode of Two Airheads and a Boxer, and let's get started. All right, so we're going to remove the rear subframe, which is pretty simple. There's just 4 bolts. What size are these bolts, Charles?
13 millimeter.
What?
13 millimeter.
13 millimeter, lucky 13 millimeter. You got one here. Of course, then there's one on this side over here. Put my hand in front of the camera.
Come on.
Just like that. The rear subframe comes off. 4 bolts. Now we can get access to the transmission.
U-joint and the swing arm.
All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the tire back on so it lifts it up off the ground. So that gives us more clearance to get access to the stuff. And then
gives us the ability. The most important thing, it gives us the ability to hit the brakes and keep the drive shaft from spinning while we're loosening the bolts on the U-joint.
all right. Well, we're going to put the wheel back on, and then we'll come back and remove the rest of the rear end.
Okay. First thing you got to do is get access to behind this boot. This is where your universal joint rides. Constant velocity joint, universal. I'm not sure which this model has, but we're going to find out. So you got to pull this off, pull the boot back, which frees up the axle. We put the rear wheel on. That way we can use the brakes to prevent the axle from moving. So let's get these hose clamps loosened so that we can get access back there. And this is generally going to be one of the grimier parts of the bike because you'll have a little bit of axle grease and oil leaking out of the drive system, particularly on something this old and I don't want to use the term neglected, but not touched in a long time. So, I'm starting to move. Work it off all the way around. Now we are going to be replacing this boot when we put everything back together, but I still don't want to destroy it. And there we go. These are, get a close up of those. These bolts are 12 millimeter. Let's see, where are we focused? There we are. 10 millimeter 12-point bolts. So you've got to have a 12-point wrench. I've got a 12-point ratcheting wrench that we're going to use to get them off. Makes it go a little bit faster. So let me grab that wrench. All right, so my ratcheting wrench would not fit in there, so I had to use a standard traditional wrench. And this takes a little finagling. Hold the brake down, keeps the axle from spinning, and break it loose. Now we've already done the other three, so this is the last one coming out. But once it comes loose, it's finger tight. You can see the universal joint in there. The flange starting to come loose. And there's the screws, bolts.
Yep.
And so now
we already took out the first three, so we didn't pour it yet, but there's 4 of those in there. You basically just got to get all 4 of those bolts out.
So now we are completely clear of the transmission. So we're ready to pull the rear wheel off, pull the whole rear subframe off, or rear swing arm off. So, all right. I believe that we can now pull the rear wheel back off. Should stay balanced. All right. Now, to remove the swing arm on these, you need a 27 millimeter nut, but not just any 27 millimeter nut will do. This is a specially cut 27 millimeter 6-point nut. Two important cuts they've done. They've made it a thin wall right in here by taking away a lot of material right there. And instead of where most of your nuts or sockets will have a chamfered edge to make it easier to go on, you can see this one is cut completely smooth. It allows you to get a better purchase with less on a thinner nut. These are very thin bolts bolts and nuts that are holding this together. So allows you to get a better purchase like that. And it's designed to fit right down inside of there. And if you look, you can see the nut, you can see the lip on the inside that's got to go in, and it fits just like that perfectly.
Yeah, standard 27 millimeter will not do it because the walls will be too thick. They won't be able to slide in between the bolt and the outside of the frame. So that is the one part, the one tool that we've been waiting on to get this rear end off, and that's why we're finally doing the rear end.
There's one. That's what I was talking about, a thin nut. It's not very thick, so you've got a standard chamfered socket would only get about half of that, even if it was narrow enough. So and there's the other nut. Now the bearings in here are conical bearings, so they're actually torqued to a spec. So when we put it back together, we've got to actually torque them to a specific specification to keep them from getting too tight and actually not moving. There we go. You can stop. All right, so we brought the bike back down to the ground because when we remove the swing arm, it's going to tilt forward. We don't want it to fall off the stand. Next thing we need to remove are these pivot pins right here, 6 millimeter Allen wrench. And unscrew each pivot pin from each side. That's what they look like. That's actually what the swing arm is pivoting on. is also a good time to remove the rear brake. This one is, as you can see, the brake rod is a little bent. So we're going to do our best to straighten that out a little bit, and then we'll be able to remove the rear brake adjusting nut and actually get the rear end off of this. There we go. Now the wing nut on this rear brake is actually got a concave surface on it. I'll show you why here in just a minute. Because there's no lock nut holding this on, and you're driving down the road and things are vibrating, you don't want it to come loose. So that concave section actually fits into give me a close up of this, Jeff. There's a round ring right here that the brake rod goes through. That concave section sits like that, so when you're adjusting your rear brake, you'll turn it 180 degrees and it'll lock back in place. So you don't want to lose that that wing nut in this process. But you also just saw me pull out the rear swing arm. That's the whole swing arm, rear axle, and rear differential all in one unit. And we'll go through disassembling this, cleaning it, and refurbishing all the bearings in it at a later time. But right now we're just working on disassembly.